Now some news from the world over. South Korea announced Thursday it's pushing to reset high-level talks with North Korea, a day after North Korea threatened to scrap next month's historic meeting between President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. In a surprise announcement, the North said it has no interest in a one-sided affair to pressure its abandonment of nuclear weapons. The communist dictatorship also broke off a high-level meeting with South Korea in protest to the U.S.-South Korean military exercises. The North have long claimed that those are an invasion rehearsal. Back in Washington, President Trump said the U.S. hasn't been notified about the North Korean threat to cancel the summit, and the White House is still hopeful that the summit will take place. And two terror attacks this past weekend in Paris. A knife-wielding assailant killed one and injured four others near Paris's famed Opera Garnier before he was killed by police Saturday night. The Islamic State claimed the attacker was one of its soldiers. According to witnesses, the attacker, who was of Chechen origin, was heard yelling Allahu Akbar as he stormed through the bustling entertainment district. Counterterrorism authorities have since arrested a close friend of the killer, another naturalized Chechen. And a family of suicide bombers in Indonesia carried out deadly attacks on 3 churches on Sunday. According to police, the father detonated a car bomb outside of one church. His 2 sons, aged 16 and 18, rode a motorcycle into a church courtyard and detonated their explosives. And the mother attacked worshipers at another church with her 2 daughters, aged 9 and 12. They were all wearing suicide vests. All 6 died. The attacks took place in the country's 2nd largest city, killing at least 7 and injuring 40 more. The terror family had returned to Indonesia from Syria, where until recently the Islamic State controlled significant territory. And as many as 62 Palestinians have been killed and thousands injured along Gaza's border in the deadliest fighting there in 4 years. Israeli forces, which have come under international criticism for using excessive force against unarmed protesters, said Hamas tried to carry out bombing and shooting attacks under the cover of the protests. 50 of the dead were militants. The mass demonstrations both commemorated the 1948 expulsion of thousands of Palestinians when Israeli statehood was recognized, and protested Monday's opening of the new U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, just a few miles away. It was the deadliest day of cross-border violence since more than 2,000 were killed in the 2014 conflict between Israel and Hamas. Joining me now with analysis of all of this is foreign policy expert and former advisor to President Trump, Dr. Walid Phares. Walid, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
I want to start with Sarah Huckabee Sanders at a press conference the other day in the wake of the North Korean summit that seems to be on tenuous ground now. Watch this.
Look, this is something that we fully expected. The president is very used and ready for tough negotiations, and if they want to meet, we'll be ready, and if they don't, that's okay too. And we'll continue with the campaign of maximum pressure if that's the case.
Is that enough? And were you surprised by this move from Kim Jong-un?
I was not surprised, but it did happen. And when it happened, it surprises you anyway.
Yeah.
I think what we need to analyze mainly is what is driving the North Koreans, what is driving on. I'm supposing there are 2 things. Number one, the clear one, is what President Trump has done. And what he has done was to unify Japanese, South Koreans, speak with the Chinese, and the Chinese block the North Koreans doing anything has to do with war. But more importantly, Raymond, we mobilized, we deployed the task forces. North Korea is looking at the task forces, and that is our card. Now, they have accepted to come to negotiations, but there is another reason, which I'm sure over the months we're going to be talking about. There is something cooking, brewing inside North Korea. Something about their jails, something about their population. Remember that incident when a soldier from North Korea tried to cross to the south?
Right.
So he knows. Un knows what's happening on the inside. He wants time. He wants to protect his regime. Now, how to behave with somebody who's politically unstable is something we need to be prepared better for.
What do you make of, what is his end game here? Is it to protect his nuke reserve? Because it seems that's what really ticked him off. They mentioned in that public statement, the vice foreign minister released, and they were particularly upset with John Bolton, who said they should follow a denuclearization model similar to Libya in 2004.
Yeah.
Well, you know what happened to Libya in 2004.
Yeah, that touched the nerve.
I'll say.
I think. Look, North Korea's regime main goal is to maintain the regime. So obviously, when they feel that the threat against the regime as a result of what they are doing, they are going to be nervous, but this could be addressed. And why that? Because the real guarantor of what's happening is really China and the United States. And if I may add, to illuminate it for the viewers, my feeling is that the Chinese have told the North Koreans, if you do this, you will be under my nuclear umbrella. You don't need your nukes. I will be like the Soviet Union did with East Germany or Bulgaria or the other countries.
Interesting. I have not heard that before. But clearly, North Korea is a puppet state of China. I mean, and China's pulling the strings. And Trump knows that. It is interesting the way he's triangulated Japan, China, South Korea, and gotten them to sort of shift slightly to put North Korea in a tough spot. So where do you think this goes? Will there be a summit on June 12th?
Well, just before the summit, let me say that what President Trump has done is really, this is new. Because over the past 2-3 administrations since the Cold War, North Korea was still the same. It was a status quo. Now, by allying his allies together, I remember during the campaign, I mentioned it to you, the South Koreans, the Japanese would come to me and say, will he abandon us if he's elected? I said, no, wait. You know, it's a much bigger picture. Second, speaking to China, China today is not the China of the 50s. It's a capitalist / communist country which has a lot of interests worldwide. They're not going to lose these interests over North Korea. A summit, I think the summit will happen. Will it happen at that date or another date? That's to be seen.
Okay, let's move to Jerusalem. A lot of coverage this week, negative and positive, of the region. The United States opened its embassy in Jerusalem. We should, to put this in context, 3 presidents before Trump have promised this. Clinton, Bush, and Obama. None of them made good on the promise. Trump did. Is that a positive or a negative for a lasting peace in the region, given the tensions and the reaction from the Palestinians?
How difficult that question, Raymond. You just made it very clear. I interact a lot with Arab media, with Arab leaders. So I hear what they say. Not just the moderates, but also the radicals. I hear also the millions and millions of American Christians who really want to see this happening. And as you just said, since 1995, not just the presidents, all presidential candidates, or almost, made that statement, all congressional majorities. So there is a consensus in America to move it. That is not to be questioned. It's about moving it and then doing what? Because if we move it and immediately engage in communication with the Arab alliance or our friends now in the Gulf or Egypt and Jordan, and then produce something for the Palestinians after we have produced something for the Israelis, it would work. So time is a matter of great importance now.
Do the Arab League have a role in this, creating a Palestinian state? Mahmoud Abbas, the head of that Palestinian state, said, this is not an embassy, this is a settlement. He said this is a settlement in Jerusalem. He's none too happy about this.
No, he's not happy because he did not receive the basic foundations of the Palestinian state before the embassy would be put in Jerusalem. Besides, Mahmoud Abbas is a PA, Palestinian Authority leader. Hamas is taking advantage of this. And behind Hamas, you have Hezbollah, and behind it, you have Iran. So he's trying to say, no, I did not abandon the idea of Jerusalem. And by the way, President Trump, that's very important, in his both statements, one last year and one this year, he kept a room that very few observers understood. He said, the final borders of Jerusalem are still to be negotiated. Very important.
So what do you think? Why give this to the Israelis? I mean, look, there's one major base here, evangelical Christians in the United States. To them, this is a major accomplishment because they see the real physical Jerusalem as the fulfillment of prophecy, and that's the only place Jesus will enter. Now, other Christians, including Catholics, have different theologies on this, but that's where the evangelicals are. So they were hailing this decision. What about the other Christians, particularly Arab Christians in the region? They're telling you what?
Arab Christians in the region have two kind of reactions. The official reaction is actually they're against, because most of the Arab Christians and Middle Eastern Christians live under regimes that are completely opposed. You know, from Lebanon to Iraq to Iran to Syria. So do not count on their public statements. Reality is, well, you did this for Israel. Why don't you do something for us? We have Christian refugees in Nineveh in northern Iraq. Why don't you have a consulate for us? We have Christians in Syria, and so on and so forth. Each community wants its own survival, its own interests, of course.
Let's move on and talk about Iran and the sanctions that the president reimposed on Iran. He said, we're not doing this nuke deal. That's over. And just this week, they accused the head of Iran's central bank of funneling money to Hezbollah. Your thoughts on that and where this could lead?
Once the president and the administration withdrew us from the Iran deal, they cannot stay in a status quo situation. They have to do something. And that something is basically putting those sanctions back. But there is a goal for the sanctions. It's not just a pleasure of putting sanctions. It's to put pressure on the Iranian regime. And that pressure is to compel them to withdraw from Iraq and Syria and Yemen and to come back to another table of negotiations. Many Europeans told me over the past few days, I mean, this is crazy. We have so much interest. I said, yes. But after a deal, there is always another deal. So he is putting all those pressures in preparation for future talks.
And Iran has moved into Iraq, into Syria. They are spreading their wings, and that must be contained in some way. Is this part of that containment?
This is the beginning of the real containment, but the containment needs more. It needs also to speak with our allies in the region, and as he always said, they need to give more, plus the Arabs, meaning the Arab coalition. We need to re-speak with our European allies and explain to them what we are doing. And
they're very upset.
They are very upset.
The sanctions are hitting them because they can't trade with Iran now, because, or they get iced out.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of caterwauling from many corridors now. How does the president hold all the parties together without losing it all here?
That's architecture. That's very difficult to be done. Now he has the two men who are at the State Department and National Security advisor who are helping them in that direction. But I would say at the end of the day, he's using his own wisdom. He's, you know, the instinct, as he did during the campaign.
Let's move on to elections in Lebanon.
Yes.
Which we saw a majority of the parliamentary seats going to members of Hezbollah.
That's right.
What happens in Lebanon as a result?
Well, that was a political disaster. We have warned about it. If you hold elections while you have a huge militia in control, it's not that the militiamen are going with the voters, but it's intimidating. So definitely Hezbollah did not get a majority, but they got a large bloc along with their allies, pro-Iranian allies. They do have now a slight majority. The concern is not that they haven't a majority. What they're going to do with this majority? What kind of legislation they're going to start to vote for? And that could be to the detriment of most Lebanese, specifically the Christians and perhaps the Druze.
Wow. And the connection between Hezbollah and Iran, they're all Shiites.
It's not just that they're all Shia. The Hezbollah of Lebanon is from the same ideology as Khomeini and Khamenei. Actually, the leadership of Hezbollah is part of the uber leadership of Iran.
Wow,
yes,
that
right.
I did not know. Yeah. Scary. Very quickly, before we go, Assad, the dictator in Syria, the AP is reporting, is meeting with Putin in Russia. What does that tell you?
That tells me, Raymond, that Russia, by staying in Syria, us by not going fast during the Obama time, this has consolidated actually not just Russian role, but also Russian protection of Assad. So Assad is going to get the protection from Putin.
Wow. So we are setting up for the proxy war that we always imagined would be here in Syria.
I hope not, but if we are not fast enough, this could happen.
Wow. Walid Phares, thank you for your insight, as
Thank you.
always. For the latest, Dr. Walid Phares, you can follow him on Twitter, @WalidPhares.